UFC 304 kicked off with 2 different champions from England, and it closed out with only one. My name is Angelo. This is We Want Picks, and I'm going to recap the entire UFC 304 fight card. Before we talk about the fights, let's look at some wild success. I am filming this within 30 minutes of the main event ending. And within that 30-minute window, I got a DM on Instagram from Jeff. And Jeff said, I just won $16,000 in DraftKings using your tools on the website, specifically the DraftKings Optimizer. So our tools on the website. He clicked a few buttons, it spit out a lineup, and Jeff now has $16,000 more than he had this morning. You can be like Jeff. You can unlock the Optimizer. You can unlock the bets, the picks, the tools, and everything else for UFC Abu Dhabi. You can do so right now. It's only $10 for an entire month. Just go to WeWantPicks.com, click Become a Member. You will unlock an entire month's worth of data, insight, information, tools, and more. Jeff paid $10, and now Jeff has $16,000. Be like Jeff. You don't need to be like me, though. My bets were middle of the road. They were decent at best. Jakey Boy hit his underdog lock of the week. Jakey Boy put $15 on the line for Belal Muhammad, and it hit. I only hit one bet, and it happened to be a Belal Muhammad bet as well. I put plus 5.5 on Belal Muhammad. So as long as that dude won a couple of rounds, I was going to get paid. Turns out he won the entire fight, so that worked out for me in spectacular fashion. So I'm happy with that bet. The other bets weren't as lucky, though. Bobby Green smoked. We'll talk about that fight. Preston Parsons, that bet was a full refund. That's a win inside the distance, decision, no action. He did not win inside the distance. It went to a decision, so a no action. I get my money back. Safety parlay missed because Calvin Loughran is an absolute clown bitch, and we'll talk about that fight in a second. First, let's talk about Shauna Bannon. She opened up the card. It was Shauna Bannon taking on Alice Ardelean. I thought this was a weird scorecard. First of all, I thought Alice Ardelean won that first round. She moved forward. She got the takedowns. She won that first round. It was pretty clear to me. I didn't think it was up for debate. And then the fight was over, and they announced the scorecards. They said 29-28, 29-28, 30-27. I said 30-27? That's got to be for Alice. It was a split decision. So when they said 30-27, to me, the most clear round of the entire fight was the first round, and that was an Alice round. So I was like, she had to win. And she didn't. And that set the tone. I instantly was like, uh-oh. There's going to be a lot of homer calls on this card. A lot of homer calls on this card. And there actually wasn't too many. There was a couple of scorecards where we were like, what the hell did I just hear? For the most part, I think most of the right people won. I do think this was incorrect. I think Alice Ardelean won this fight. She was the one moving forward. She was the one attempting takedowns. She was the one being like, Alice Ardelean showed up and put on a fight. And if this is a reminder to anything, it's that you should just be betting plus 3.5 on all women's MMA fights. Jacob had a bet on Alice Ardelean and it didn't cash, but for perspective, it was at plus 250. Plus 250. She was a plus 250 underdog, and I think she won this fight. At the very least, she lost a razor-thin split decision, and if you had a plus 3.5, that would have paid out. So I think we just need to look at all women's fights where the odds are wide as hell and just bet the underdog at plus 3.5. It would have worked for the Molly fight as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I do think this was a bad decision to start off the card. It wasn't the worst decision I've ever seen. It was kind of back and forth. Shauna Bannon was pretty tough, hanging out, moving forward. She's not somebody you can just beat on. But I thought Alice Ardelean looked good, and this was definitely a bit of a homer call. And Shauna Bannon benefited, even though she's not English, she's just right over the river, and benefited from a little bit of that hometown crowd. Then we had Mick Parkin show up with some power in his hands. And I'm good with it. Mick Park was the first person in the safety parlay. So great, let's go. Let's start that off with a bang. He came out, he finished Lukasz Brzeski, dropped him with his hands, and got it done. And I loved it. A lot of people fell into the over 1.5 trap. And I didn't, because it wasn't a 1.5 round line. It was a 2.5 round line. If it was a 1.5 round line, I might have fallen into that trap. Luckily for us, the bookies put up 2.5, so I didn't touch it. I was like, 2.5 is kind of crazy. Lukasz Brzeski sucks. He'll probably get finished. But it's going to be way too close for me to spend my money on. So luckily, I didn't touch that round line, because if it was a 1.5, I would have done the over, and I would not have made my money. But Mick Parkin looked good. He looked sharp. He didn't wrestle. I thought Mick Parkin was going to wrestle because Lukasz Brzeski is big. He's a good striker. Mick Parkin wasn't worried about it. He was sort of looking for the power. He ultimately found it. But what I do want to see, though, is I want to see Mick Parkin wrestle a little more. Now I'm nervous because if he fights a really good striker next, I don't know if I could trust him to shoot. He didn't shoot in this fight, and he didn't need to. Obviously, he won on his feet. But you understand my point, right? You want to see a wrestler at least try to wrestle. You want to see it so that you know they still have it and they're not one of these guys that just abandons it. Mick Parkin looked great. There are no critiques there at all. I mean, what else could I change? The guy looked fantastic. Opened up the safety parlay with a win. I was feeling pretty good about it. Then we came to Sam Patterson and Kiefer Crosbie. I mean, these guys both stink, right? Like, we can agree neither one of these guys are very good. Sam Patterson got blasted in the face a couple of times. For a dude that tall at this weight, he's way too hittable. I cannot imagine being 6'3" at 170 pounds and getting hit as often as he does. Bro, just keep your hands out. Just leave it like this. You could have your hands wide open like this. Keep your hands out and push, and people won't get to your head, but they get to his head. People can get in on him. They work in, they touch him up. Kiefer Crosbie touched up Sam Patterson. Touched him up. Then they ended up on the ground, and Sam Patterson's just so freaking long. He sucked up that head and arm, and that was the end of it. I mean, pretty straightforward. Sam Patterson was supposed to win. He was the second biggest favorite on the entire card. He was supposed to win this fight, and he did win this fight. And I think the general consensus was just, well, Kiefer Crosby's not UFC caliber. And he's probably not. But is Sam Patterson? Dude, he got touched up. I can't be clear enough how crazy it was, how often Kiefer Crosbie was touching Sam Patterson's shit. Anybody with a little bit of power can get to Sam Patterson and put that dude out. Then we had Modestas Bukauskas taking on Marcin Prachnio. Marcin Prachnio seemed to be the consensus underdog in the community. And when I say community, I'm not talking about other content creators. I don't really watch anybody else. I'm talking about you guys, the comment section, the live chatters, the people that engage. It seemed to be Marcin Prachnio. Jacob's underdog lock of the week was Belal Muhammad. People hated that. And most of the comments were, dude, Marcin Prachnio is easy. He's the lock. And I get it. The general theme seemed to be, well, Marcin Prachnio has fought the higher level of competition. Marcin Prachnio has some very good wins under his belt. He should be the underdog lock of the week. He should be the favorite in this fight against Modestas Bukauskas. But that's not what we got. Now, there were a few moments. Where Marcin Prachnio looked great. At one point in time, Modestas Bukauskas moved forward, pushed Marcin against the cage, cracked him a few times, and with his back basically against the cage, falling backwards, Marcin Prachnio throws up a head kick and hits Modestas Bukauskas in the head with maybe 2 feet of clearance. It was crazy. And I was like, oh man, the tables are turning here. Marcin Prachnio is good. He is durable, but ultimately he didn't have an answer on the ground. Modestas Bukauskas was able to get the fight to the ground. He was able to control from there. He was able to work from there. He ultimately submitted Marcin Prachnio with an arm triangle while in half guard. And I'm pausing for dramatic effect. That should not happen. You shouldn't be able to finish it. You should have to come all the way around to the outside, circle the head, get your hips down and back. That's what should happen. That's not what happened. I am assuming that Marcin Prachnio was just absolutely exhausted. And once that choke was in, he's like, yeah, I'm done. Forget it. I'm done. And he had a little bit of quit in him. But Modestas Bukauskas looked good. He looked good. He was the favorite. He was supposed to win. At this point in the card, we had not had a single underdog win. It was all favorites until this fight. Finally, an underdog won. Oban Elliott just outlasted Preston Parsons. This was the biggest bet I had on the card. The bet was a 2-unit bet on Preston Parsons to win inside the distance, decision, no action. And basically what that bet meant was if Preston Parsons finished Oban Elliott, as he has finished 9 of his 11 wins, I would have been paid. But if Preston Parsons lost a decision or even won a decision, I got a full refund. And that's what happened. I got a full refund. And ultimately, what it came down to was Preston Parsons is very dangerous and Oban Elliott is not. So if Preston wins, he will win by finish. But he could lose because Oban Elliott is the better, more well-rounded fighter. And that's what we saw. Saw somebody who had cleaner striking. Saw somebody who could defend some takedowns. Saw somebody who wasn't going to get in some trouble on the ground. He was backing up Preston. And Preston on his back foot is not the wrestler that he is when he's on his front foot. So Preston, at this point in his career, he's submission or bust. And if we go back a few fights, when he fought Trevin Giles, I think we all left that fight being like, Preston Parsons sucks, right? Like, he's a bit of a jiu-jitsu nerd, kind of sucks. And then he had a couple good wins. And we're like, nah, Preston, this is the guy. This is the guy. So I picked him to win this fight because I thought he would get the takedowns. He outlasted Matt Semmelsberger. And I was like, all right, Matt Semmelsberger's a dangerous guy. And he was fine there. Ultimately, Preston didn't win. But what I learned from the Matt Semmelsberger fight is that Preston is tough. He can survive. And at the very least, he was going to survive in this fight if he wasn't going to win. So luckily, I got a refund on that bet. Otherwise, the night would have been a complete bloodbath for me. But the reality is, it's crazy to be at this level. It's crazy to be fighting in the premier organization on planet Earth. It's crazy to be fighting on a pay-per-view and basically have one skill set. Shoot some takedowns, work some jiu-jitsu. That's kind of crazy to me. So congratulations to Oban Elliott for being just the more well-rounded fighter in the giant fighting promotion on planet Earth. And then we had what became one of the most hyped fights, ended as one of the more boring ones, and ultimately had some drama when it was all said and done. So let me walk you through everything here. There was a rumor a few months ago that these two, that Manel Kape and Muhammad Mokaev, got at it at the UFC Performance Institute, that they just went at each other. There was a fist fight, a physical altercation. It was a rumor. They both sort of denied it. No big deal. Then heading into the fight week, then heading into this week in London or Manchester, they were in the hotel together. They took a picture together. There's no beef. Don't worry about it. It's all fake. And then apparently, I don't know, these are rumors, Muhammad Mokaev cheap shot Manel Kape. Cheap shot him, just punched him, cheap shot him in the lobby or some nonsense like that. A full fight broke out. Then Manel Kape is tweeting, "You're not a real Muslim, you're a poor person from the streets." It was this whole thing. It was wild. This fight went from the main card all the way down to the non-televised prelims and then back up to the first fight on the televised prelims. I think that drama had something to do with it. Ultimately, this was like a flyweight title eliminator. They're both on good win streaks. Muhammad Mokaev's fully undefeated. What we ended up getting, though, inside that cage, the very first 30 seconds was like, here we go. Here's a good fight. Because the first 30 seconds of this fight, Muhammad Mokaev comes running across the cage and throws a leg kick. What? He didn't shoot a takedown. He didn't fire his hands away. He threw a little bit of baby leg kick. And then it was a bit of a staring contest for a while. This was not a good fight. It was not an exciting fight. When what the heck did I just say there? When Muhammad Mokaev ultimately shot a takedown at the end of the first round, it got stuffed. Manel Kape stuffed it. And it was embarrassing for Muhammad. It made Muhammad Mokaev look bad. Manel Kape won that first round. Second round, a little closer, a little more back and forth. Maybe Muhammad Mokaev snuck that round out. Third round, Manel Kape was winning that round. Was winning the round. And then ultimately ended up on his back, just sort of accepted the position, got ridden out the last however long. Muhammad Mokaev won the decision. Couple of crazy things. First of all, one of the judges gave him a 30-27. That's absurd. That's absurd. That's almost as bad as the 30-27 in the Shauna Bannon fight. That's an absurd scorecard. You should be ashamed of yourself. But you see the headline on the screen. It says, "Is Dana White cutting Muhammad Mokaev?" And that's because Dana White, I'm going to read the quote. Dana White said about Muhammad Mokaev, "The PFL is going to probably get a great undefeated guy. Good luck to them." Sounds like Dana White's done with Muhammad. Cut his ass. Who cares? Fuck him. And it's interesting because I was talking to some people tonight while we were watching the fights about this. We were talking about some ex-UFC fighters that are now in Bellator and how they were specifically told by the UFC, stop wrestling or you're gone. And on one hand, it's absurd. You're a fighter. I'm supposed to win fights by any means necessary. I'm supposed to win fights. Don't tell me I'm not winning the way you want me to win. On the other hand, this is entertainment. And if a fighter is boring as hell, what are they going to do? Give Muhammad Mokaev a title shot so he could be the most boring champion of all time and nobody will buy pay-per-views and the UFC literally won't make money on the cards that he's on? So it's a weird situation where this is sports, but it's also entertainment. Like the Patriots. They were a very boring team through their 5 Super Bowl rings. A very boring team. But they showed up, did what they did, very formulaic, won the Super Bowls. Nobody cared. Didn't affect the ratings either. Because people tune in. It's football. It's one game. Fist fights are different. People watch fights for the fight itself, not the outcome. You watch the fights for every punch, every takedown, every kick. You don't watch the fight to be like, let's see who won. Oh, I don't care how he wins as long as he wins. Unless it's your favorite fighter, you're watching the fight for the fight itself. So now the UFC has a couple of very boring fighters who don't do anything exciting, but they're good. They win. And it sounds like, and obviously this is Dana speaking after an event that was honestly not thrilling. He's probably a little frustrated with the event. So this is Dana White speaking about the event. And just candidly, sounds like I'm done with Muhammad Mokaev. And the funny part about that is, actually nothing about this is funny at all. The interesting about that is, let's say he cuts Muhammad Mokaev. Like, yeah, fuck him. I'm done with him. I'm not paying this guy 80 and 80 or 100 and 100 to put us to sleep. Mokaev's the one screwed. Doesn't matter to the UFC. If Muhammad Mokaev was not on UFC 304, do you think one fewer person buys that pay-per-view? Do you think there's a single person on this planet that was going to buy the pay-per-view and then they said Muhammad Mokaev's not on this card anymore, so then they don't buy it? Or somebody who wasn't going to buy it and then he was on it, so they did buy it? And the perspective I'm just trying to give you here is this is a straight-up monopoly and the fighters have no control whatsoever. And if you piss off the big man, you're screwed. I'm interested to see what happens to Muhammad Mokaev going forward if he does end up cut. Ultimately, he won this fight. He's 12-0 now. He won this fight. Whether you agree with that scorecard or not, whether you think he won the fight or not, he won the fight. I think he did win. But I'm thinking it's much closer to 29-28, maybe even a split. And a lot of it is because Manel Kape basically accepted bottom position in that last round. Then we had the most frustrating of the night for me. This was the most frustrating fight of the night for me. Obviously, Calvin Loughran was in the safety parlay, big mistake. Let me walk you through my logic. Because I saw people being like, "What in what world? Why would you?" Shut up. Jake Hadley is a tiny little man. A tiny, small, little, eensy-weensy, puny little man. Calvin Loughran is big for 135 pounds. Jake Hadley's not even big for 125 pounds. Jake Hadley was stepping up on short notice. Calvin Loughran has no problem moving forward and being a big bully wrestler. In my mind, Calvin Loughran was going to move forward and just big brother Jake Hadley. Bully him, hold him against the cage. I thought it was going to be I said, as soon as we sat down to watch the fight, I'm like, this fight's going to be boring as hell and I'm good with it. But we didn't get Cowan being a big brother bully. We didn't get that, did we? We got him with his stupid wide base and his stupid fist like this, like punching over the top, landing, and then his hands out like this. Just like one punch at a time, like he was doing something special. It was the most frustrating thing I've ever seen. So little tiny ass Energizer Bunny Jake Hadley was dancing around, landing. And that's ultimately what happened. He landed with more volume. Calvin had a takedown, more control time. Jake Hadley landed with more volume, defended a few takedowns. Jake Hadley should have won that fight. He should have won that fight. I get it. It's just so frustrating to watch. And you guys know the drill. You can't win every bet every week. You can't pick every fight every week correctly. And that's fine. And you know what? In the main event, I was like, I think Leon Edwards can win this fight. And Belal won. And I'm glad to get that pick wrong because Belal showed up, had the performance of a lifetime, looked great, did what he was supposed to do. Can't be mad at anybody in that fight. But you get a fight like this. Somebody who's talented, bigger, had a full training camp, and doesn't do what he's supposed to do. Tell you what, if Callan Loughran fought his ass off and was just outclassed, it's hard to be mad at that. Ultimately, there's always somebody better. There's literally always somebody better. And if he just ran into somebody better, it'd be a different breakdown, but he didn't. He just didn't do what he was supposed to do. Hey, dummy, close the distance. Hold him against the cage. Hey, stupid, stop throwing one punch at a time over the top like you're going to do something. You didn't knock him out in the first round. You didn't knock him out in the second round. Why are you still doing that shit in the third round? How about you change it up? Why don't you shoot a real takedown instead of just leaning on him? Or just lean on him Holly Holm style and just rack up the control points. Either way, that wide base one punch at a time isn't working for you. He's now 1-2 in the UFC, and I hope he's out of a job. Jake Hadley, good for you. Stepped up on short notice. On a pay-per-view card at home, got the win. Good for him. Second biggest underdog on the card. Third biggest, something like that. Good for little baby boy Jake Hadley. Then we had Molly McCann lay an absolute egg. I avoided this fight at all costs. And if you remember my breakdown was, when I looked at this, I really wanted to go with Brunner Brazil. I wanted to pick Brunner Brazil here because Molly McCann's not good. And I was like, but then I rewatched Brunner Brazil's fights, and while she is good, and she's probably the better fighter, she's gun shy. She doesn't let her hands go. And because she doesn't let her hands go, I don't know if I can pick her. And then Molly McCann became a bigger and bigger and bigger favorite as the week went on. And I was like, this is crazy. I get it. She physically looks spectacular at this weight class. But a couple of crazy things. One, Molly McCann was really small. She went down a weight. She went from 125 to 115, and she looked tiny. You would have thought she went up in weight. Brunner Brazil is tremendous. Brunner Brazil might be the biggest 115-pounder on planet Earth. It is crazy how big Brunner Brazil is. Crazy. Number two, Brunner Brazil looked great. You can't dog Molly. I just dogged Cowlin for not doing what he was supposed to do. You can't dog Molly in this fight. Molly did not quit. She did not quit. She continued to move forward. She fought her best fight. She tried to make it ugly. Ultimately, she just lost. She fought somebody better. You can't dog somebody who fights their ass off and loses. And Brunner Brazil looks spectacular. She just blasted Molly in the stomach. Blasted the body. Molly got dropped, doubled over. Brunner took her time, went back to it, stepped back, took her time, went back to it. It was a masterclass from Brunner Brazil in control. Lesser fighters would have just charged and ran forward and rampaged and potentially given Molly a reversal and a position so that Molly could have taken over and recovered. But not Brunner. She stepped back. She waited, found the spot again. Stepped back, waited. Let me punch it. Let me kick it. Let me knee it. Brunner Brazil looked great. She looked absolutely great. Ultimately, it was a decision, but that's not from lack of trying. That's because Molly McCann is ridiculously tough. I think this weight class will suit her well. I think ultimately she just fought somebody better, took a really bad shot to the gut, and once you're hit there, it's a long. You're not just gonna take 3 deep breaths and be okay. So Molly McCann, tough as shit. Brunner Brazil, very good, and maybe finally just sort of stepping into her own and finding her rhythm and not afraid to let her hands go. Then we had the actual biggest favorite on the card. Nathaniel Wood took on Daniel Pineda. This was a pretty underwhelming fight. A very underwhelming fight. Nathaniel Wood, he was just sharper, cleaner everywhere, right? He was the cleaner, faster, sharper, more powerful, just better almost everywhere until the third round came. And then there was a grappling exchange. And all of a sudden, Daniel Pineda, who has only been to 1 decision in 43 fights, ends up on top, ends up in control. Daniel Pineda was in a position where he was winning the round, late into the fight. A guy that has only seen his scorecard 1 time was winning the last round of a fight. And that's ultimately because Nathaniel Wood's not a killer. Fast, accurate, powerful strikes, but he's not a killer. And that's fine. You don't need him to be. He was another leg of the safety parlay that won. His odds were surprisingly affordable. He should have been a much bigger favorite, like in theory and on paper. And then ultimately you watch the fight and you're like, yeah, 4-1 looks right. He's not doing anything great. And he put himself in a little trouble at the end there. So I don't know what we know. I don't know if we learned anything about Nathaniel Wood here. I really don't. Because he looked good. Not great. He won the fight, but he was supposed to win. He was the biggest favorite on the card. He didn't finish a guy who has been finished many, many times. This dude has been finished 16 times. Finished 16 times. And Nathaniel Wood couldn't finish him. And then Nathaniel Wood gave up a good portion of the third round. Good win, I guess, but was it? Then we had the main card opener. We had Arnold Allen just sort of touching up Giga Chikadze. Too fast, too sharp, too accurate. That's what this was. Arnold Allen was his old self. A lot of people were very quick to try to write him off. He was on that 11-fight win streak or 10 years unbeaten or something crazy. Then he lost to Max Holloway. Okay, square. That's a good loss. Then he got out-wrestled by Movsar Evloev and made that fight close, real close. And under the new grounded opponent rules, he wins that fight. But people were still like, Arnold Allen's done. They gave him Giga Chikadze and he looked good. He was just faster. He was cleaner. He was landing. He was more accurate. Arnold Allen's good. Arnold Allen is very good. And Giga Chikadze is good. Not as busy as he should be. And that whole, I use my legs like hands and they're like jabs. That's a little ridiculous. But Arnold Allen looked absolutely fantastic. Won this fight, basically belled about. A couple of really good exchanges. Giga had his moments, landed clean a few times where it was like, what's going to happen? But ultimately, Arnold Allen was just a little too fast and a little too accurate for Giga Chikadze here. Pretty straightforward win, and it was a decision. This main card slowed down quite a bit. We had two very impressive first-round finishes, and the rest were just not great. And this is one of those fights. Straightforward, clean, made sense, but wasn't the most entertaining fight we've ever seen. This was a decent fight. This blood, though, implies that it was a wild slug fight. It wasn't. This is not the picture. No, let me rephrase that. This picture doesn't represent reality. All this picture shows is that there's a cut on the head, so it was very bloody. What we got was Christian Leroy Duncan moving forward. We had a couple of good exchanges. It was a slobber knocker at times, maybe 10 seconds here, 10 seconds there. But Gregory Rodriguez did the right thing. He wrestled. He was smart about it. He shot the takedowns. And I was talking to people about this tonight when we were eating a really delicious seafood platter that I put together. We were talking about this over cracking some crab legs. And I was like, ever since Gregory Rodriguez got knocked out by Bruno Ferreira, he went back to his wrestling roots. And I'm glad he did. I'm glad he did. This was the hardest fight on the card for me to pick. The hardest fight on the card for me to pick. I just didn't know what I went back and forth a million times over. And ultimately, Gregory Rodriguez went to that wrestling well, and that's what did it for him. The takedowns, the control. His jiu-jitsu is so freaking good. And even though he looks like he's 48, he's not that old. And he has the cardio. He's got the strength. He's a pretty durable guy outside of getting cut very easily. And while it had flashes of brilliance and was exciting at times, it was an okay fight. And good for Gregory Rodriguez being that smart. Because not a lot of fighters are that smart. Not a lot of fighters make the adjustments they need to make from fight to fight to fight. And Gregory Rodriguez understood the assignment, realized how good Christian Leroy Duncan was, and said, I should shoot some takedowns. Let me work in some takedowns. And that's what he did, and he looked good doing it. Then we had one of the most surprising outcomes of the card. And it's not shocking that Paddy won this fight. I get it. Paddy could have always won this fight. What was shocking is how he won it, though. Paddy's striking looked good. Let me walk you through. If you didn't see what happened, you're going to see Paddy Pimblett wins by submission. And you're going to be like, oh, okay, he must have shot a takedown and got it. No, he did not. Paddy Pimblett was winning the striking exchanges. So all of a sudden, King Green shot a takedown. And then Paddy jumps guillotine, which is always very, very stupid. But what he did that was sort of brilliant is he jumped guillotine, threw his leg over the top, and immediately turned the guillotine into a triangle choke, and that's what we have here. Bobby Green was unconscious in the triangle choke. Referee didn't really notice. So then Paddy Pimblett turns it from a triangle to an armbar, and We'll find out if Bobby has some actual arm damage there, because he was completely unconscious while in this triangle arm bar. And then he wasn't moving his right arm after the fight. Like when he was shaking Paddy's hand, he did not move his right arm. So Paddy Pimblett looked spectacular because the striking was wildly improved. Bobby Green was supposed to be the better striker, and he was not. I totally understand Paddy schooling him on the ground. Paddy's just so freaking slick on the ground. But the striking is what was impressive. Snappy jab in his face, landed clean a few times. Bobby shot a takedown because Paddy was landing so clean. What a wild, wild turn of events that was. This was probably, to me, fight of the night. And really, it wasn't like a wild back and forth. We actually didn't have a lot of fights on this card that were wild back and forth. It wasn't a wild back and forth fight, but it was surprising, shock. Like it evoked all the emotions when you watch it. You absolutely just, they're like, oh my God, look what happened. Oh my God. So it was awesome. Very happy for Paddy. Great fight. Curious to see what they do for him next, because, I mean, all of a sudden he's ranked. All of a sudden Paddy Pimblett is ranked. And his post-fight speech was great because he was like, all the haters, you're going to move the goalposts. Actually, that wasn't a bad accent. His point being, you said I suck. Then I beat Tony Ferguson. You say he's old. Then I do this and you say this. So no matter what I do, you always have an excuse. And he's like, I just beat Bobby Green. He was supposed to beat me. He was the favorite. He's the ranked fighter. And now, instead of giving my credit, you're just going to say, well, he's old, he's washed, and all of that. And Paddy's not wrong. That's exactly what people do. That's exactly what people do. If you're looking for a reason to hate somebody, you'll find your reason. Doesn't matter. And you will move the goalpost to prove your point. Oh, he's not that good. He is old. But great. I mean, great for Paddy. Great for Paddy. It's hard to not like him after a couple of these interviews and a performance like that. Then we had the co-main event of the evening. We still don't know shit about Tom Aspinall. We still don't know shit. This guy won this fight in 1 minute. And it was questionable. The question is, was this too early? This picture is basically when the referee stopped the fight. So what happened was a couple of striking exchanges, nothing crazy meaningful. Curtis Blaydes landed a couple clean shots on Tom. Tom didn't really care, closed the distance, worked Curtis against the cage. We're like, holy shit, is Tom Aspinall going to shoot a takedown? Then they separate. Tom Aspinall lands like a short, stiff jab, and Curtis falls down. But it was very clear to me that Curtis fell down because he was off balance from the jab, not because he was chinny. Right? It was more of a like landed the jab and pushed, and Curtis was backing up, so he fell down. For some reason, though, when Curtis fell down, he immediately goes to his hands and knees like wrestling instincts so he can get back up. He goes to his hands and knees, covers a little bit. Tom Aspinall jumps on him, starts just landing, just punching left, right, landing. At one point, Curtis Blaydes is completely flat, stomach down flat. Then the referee gets close. Then he starts to build his base up a little bit. And that's what we have here. This is him in this picture building his base back up. Tom lands a few more and the ref stops it. When I watched it real time, it didn't look like an early stoppage. And then they showed it over and over and over, and they put it in slow motion. And then it's like, that was probably an early stoppage. I don't think anything was going to change, though. I just hate when there's doubt. Because Tom Aspinall was basically on his back. Tom Aspinall was going to land as many strikes as he wanted to. He was going to do whatever he wanted to do, and he was going to win that fight. But give him another 30 seconds so that nobody can argue about it tomorrow. Give him another 30 seconds so there's not people on Twitter just saying nonsense. Tom Aspinall won this fight, but we still don't know anything. We already knew he had some power. We already knew that. But we still don't know what happens if Tom gets in trouble. What is Tom going to look like in the third round? Can Tom defend a takedown? We still don't know any of those things. But I'm kind of glad because we got to see Tom Aspinall defend his interim belt while John Jones does fuck all. Does absolutely nothing. John Jones is probably going to fight a 50-year-old man, literally like a 45-year-old man in November if all goes well. If all goes well, he'll fight a 45-year-old man in November. And we got Tom Aspinall out here just taking people out. He just beat the literal best wrestler in UFC heavyweight history, just statistically speaking. Before that, he won the belt by knocking out one of the most dangerous strikers we've ever seen. And Jon Jones is yelling and screaming at women USADA agents just trying to get a little bit of piss from him at his house. They are not the same. I'm over the Jon Jones era. I'm over it. And I've seen every single fight that guy's ever had. And I was in the Jon Jones is the GOAT camp. And that could still be the argument. You could still argue if Jon Jones is the GOAT. These are not the same conversation. The conversation now, though, is let Tom Aspinall be the true undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Because Jon Jones isn't defending that belt. We're going on, a year and a half? Almost 2 years? It'll probably be 2 years-ish. Almost 2 years when he finally fights. And he's going to fight a guy that hadn't fought in 3 years? Right? What are we doing? What are we doing? Tom Aspinall, as far as I'm concerned, is the UFC heavyweight champion. And now Belal Muhammad is the UFC welterweight champion of the world. And good for him. Good for him. It was such a weird week. It was such a weird week. Listen, I picked Leon Edwards. And I specifically said Belal Muhammad could absolutely win this fight. He could absolutely win this fight. But that's just not how the internet works, right? That's not how people are. Everybody speaks in absolute fact. There are no two sides. There is no this could happen. There is no reasonable. It's 100% fact Belal Muhammad sucks, worst lock of the week of all time, or remember the name Belal Muhammad, Leon's overrated. There's no middle of the road. I might be the only person that can see two sides of an argument. It's insane to see the internet do what the internet does. But I was riding with Jacob this week. I picked Leon, but I put no money on that. Until later in the week, Jacob and I are doing our show, and I'm listening to him talk about Belal. I already was like, Belal could win this fight. And I'm listening to him talk about it. I'm listening to him break down Leon in explicit detail. If you guys remember, Jacob bet $2,000 on Leon Edwards to beat Kamaru Usman the second time. $2,000. So he did his research. He knows Leon Edwards inside and out. And I was listening to it. I was listening to the passion. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to full-blown bet on Belal Muhammad, but I'll do a plus 5.5, which is basically just buying points on the judges' scorecards. Ultimately, I didn't need him because Belal won outright. But let's say he got screwed, because I actually thought that this fight could have been 2-2 going into the fifth, because it was very clear, and I could be getting my rounds mixed up. I'm sorry. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. It was very clear to me Belal Muhammad won that first round. It was clear to everybody. The second round, Leon Edwards finished that round strong. Belal was winning most of it, and then Leon Edwards had like a minute at the end, 40 seconds to a minute at the end, where he was on top. He was controlling. I was like, shit, man. He could have stolen that round, because Belal Muhammad didn't do much with the control, but he had the control. What he did, though, is have some very flashy takedowns. At one point, he had a single. He took Leon down. Leon was down. Leon stands up. Belal Muhammad picks up the single, jacks it up over his head, and dumps Leon Edwards on his head. Dumps him on his head. It was wildly impressive. But the second round, again, Belal Muhammad had a couple of flashy takedowns, won most of the round, but Leon ended the round on top. Round 3, Leon won that round. He ended up on top early, had Belal Muhammad's back the entirety of the third round. Fourth round, Belal Muhammad won that round. And again, I could be getting these confused. It is very late. I could have them all backwards and out of source, but that's how these rounds were going. Whether I mixed up 2 and 3, what have you. I thought this could have been 2-2 going into the fifth. And it was up to Belal to make something happen. And he did. He moved forward, snappy jab, stayed in Leon's face, got the takedowns, won that fight. But again, 40 seconds left in the very last round. Leon Edwards gets on top, finally does something. I have never seen a champion be such a do-nothing, take-your-time kind of guy. He finally decides to do something, lands an insane elbow, immediately breaks Belal Muhammad's nose. It's blushing, gushing blood everywhere, and Belal Muhammad is effed up in the face. And I was like, oh my God. If you were looking for an excuse to give this round to Leon, you just got it. You just got your excuse. He blew up Belal Muhammad's face. Blood everywhere, damage matters, all those things. And I was like, we might get a weird scorecard. Luckily, we did not. Belal Muhammad won this fight. He should have won the fight. You never know what you're going to get sometimes. And good for him, because not only did the wrestling do what the wrestling was going to do, his jab looked great. Dude, Belal Muhammad's striking looked good. It looked good. I don't think you could sit there and say Leon Edwards outstruck Belal Muhammad. I really don't. Belal Muhammad had that snappy step-in jab that was touching Leon Edwards. Look at their faces. Leon Edwards has that welt under his eye. Belal Muhammad's nose is fucked up. That happened in the last 30 seconds of the fight. That wasn't from striking on the feet. That was because in an exchange on the ground, Leon landed that elbow. So Belal Muhammad looked great. He looked great in this fight. I am curious what they're going to do. They're not going to do a rematch. Leon Edwards is too boring to give a rematch to. He's just boring. Name an exciting Leon Edwards fight. You literally cannot. He's never been in an exciting fight. He's had exciting moments, but he's never had a full-blown exciting fight. Belal Muhammad, it was funny to turn him into a meme, but the reality is that dude just is winning, moving forward, getting better, winning. Moving forward, getting better, winning. Congratulations to Belal Muhammad. Very happy for this guy. I don't know what they're going to do next for him, but I'm looking forward to it. They might give him Shavkat. He could be Shavkat, frankly. Shavkat's takedowns are not as good as we once thought they were. Either way, Belal Muhammad, the new welterweight champion of the world, and a lot of people did not think it was possible. Guys, next week is UFC Abu Dhabi. And we released the greatest research tool in the history of time. You can unlock this tool. This tool is going to give you all the data you could ever want or need, and then you can click buttons, stack filters, see that data, visualize on a chart, export that chart. You can even click the little round buttons at the peaks of the chart, and it'll take you out to watch the videos themselves. It's the greatest research tool in history. It has interactive data. It has charts. It has stackable filters. It is a tape index. It's got graphing and that you can export, and it has events well out into the future. We are well into September with the data loaded into this tool. This is available right now for premium members. So is the DraftKings Optimizer. This DraftKings Optimizer is preloaded with ownership projections, and those ownership projections just won one of our premium members $16,000. Jeff here won $16,000 using the DraftKings Optimizer on our website. You'll also have access to the Prop Hunter, a brand new tool as well. You can unlock all of these things, all the picks, all the bets, the round line leans, and everything you could ever want or need heading into UFC Abu Dhabi right now. Just go to WeWantPicks.com, click Become a Member at the top. It is only $10 for an entire month. That's 4 events for $10. And finally, I'll give you $50. Go to WeWantPicks.com/bets. Sign up with any one of our affiliate partners using our link, and I'll send you $50 as a thank you.